Okay, hello and welcome everyone to our webinar today. Why SMBs are choosing Microsoft Azure versus other cloud platforms. So welcome everyone. We're just gonna give it a second or two here while people are joining the meeting. Looks like there's still a couple jumping on right now. Excited about this topic today. I speak with a lot of businesses, a lot of companies are very interested if they're not already using Azure. They're definitely interested, asking lots of questions. Why would you use Azure versus other means of cloud services? So if that's what your question is, you're in the right place today. So let's just jump into things here. I think a lot of the people on the call probably already know who we are, Pace. But if you don't, we're an MSP. We've been in business a little over 20 years, specializing in proactive managed IT support, managed IT security, managed cloud services. We're also an ISO 9001 business, as well as a Microsoft Gold partner in cloud solutions, very applicable to our topic today. And for the last 7 years, we've been a great place to work. That's our kind of our support and company structure on the left there, but I'll maybe talk a little bit about that because it's going to be appropriate a little bit later on in the webinar today. If this is your first webinar with us, welcome. But if you've been to some of our other ones, welcome back. But if this is your first webinar or you haven't attended very many, we do keep access and copies to all of our training webinars that we've run. If you just go to our website, pacetechnical.com, under the media dropdown, you select webinars and you can get free access to any of the other webinars we've done in the past. We have also done some other cloud webinars in the past on Microsoft Teams, lots of training and information on IT security, etc. Lots of topics in there. So go ahead and have a look at that if you'd like to access some of those. So I'm the president of Pace Technical, and I'm joined today by our expert, Matt Hache, who works with one of our partners. It's an organization called Pax8, and he's an infrastructure solutions consultant with them. Now they are one of our Azure partners that we use for expertise in this area. So we definitely have the right guy on the call with us today. So welcome, Matt.
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's great to be here today.
Awesome. So, we're going to jump right into it. I'm going to let Matt go ahead and run with this for now, but maybe he'll give you a bit more of an introduction about himself first, and then we'll jump right into things.
Fantastic. I think it's worth understanding where I come from, just so I'm just not another face, and how I'm hopefully bringing value to this webinar today. So as mentioned, I'm Matt Hache. I'm an infrastructure solutions consultant, and my specific role is to prop up organizations that are cloud forward, cloud centric, like Pace Technical, to really adopt, optimize, and succeed in Azure. Pace is taking the steps and understands the value in this technology, and I'm hoping today I can show you why they've made this decision. Myself, I'm actually based in Southern Ontario, so I'm not just some face from the US or anything like that, even though we are a US-based organization. And I've actually worked in the very same industry that Michael and his team are currently servicing. At least the last 7 years focusing on cloud infrastructure, but going back about 15, 16 years from answering phones for local cable companies in Hamilton and things like that. So very kind of touched into this industry, and I see what it's doing for people in Southern Ontario, not just worldwide. And I think that's why it's a great technology and platform to really centralize ourselves on. So we'll hop to the next slide here. So the agenda we're going to cover today is really, first off, why choose cloud services? Some of this stuff may be really upfront and you may be aware of, but yeah, this is why we want to do cloud. But specifically why you should adopt more of it and kind of, put your business in a position to be leveraging these services, because a lot of other businesses are, and it's really starting to shift and change the landscape. We're going to talk about the cloud in general and Azure, because While I deal day to day with a lot of very technical people, I understand that, there's a lot of obscurity around what cloud could be. So I want to make sure there's just some clarity of where it stands, just so you get a better understanding of where we're coming from. We're going to talk about the benefits of Azure over other private and public cloud, and we'll kind of delineate between the two on that just briefly, and why you should, put your eggs in the Azure basket. We'll talk about the flexibility that comes with a cloud approach, and then we'll talk about choosing the right provider to make sure that, even though you've maybe aligned on Azure, not all providers are treated equally and the same. And Michael will speak a little bit more to that as well. We'll move forward. Great. So why cloud services? Traditional infrastructure generally would require a lot of kind of forward planning, especially if you're looking to buy a server or hardware to kind of put in a closet. You try to have this Nostradamus-like effect of, where's my business going to be in 5 years? And a lot of organizations will really think, yeah, we can totally do that. But I think coming on the other side of a pandemic, we can only account for so much. If 3 years ago you would have spoken to me about building a server and trying to plan the next 5 years of your organization, I probably would have been able to comfortably do that. Now I kind of have a fresh review and renewal on this perspective, because we as a country and as a business need to be agile. We need to be able to really grow and shrink and move with market requirements. If you were any of the organizations that had to suddenly go remote in 2020, depending on where you were in your journey technological wise, that may not have been an option. And it's had ripples throughout the industry worldwide, and to this day really shapes what we're doing. So that's why you should consider cloud services, at least from a business standpoint. But some other advantages are things like economies of scale. Traditionally, a lot of these services and platforms, whether it's security features, collaboration, were generally gated behind Fortune 500 companies or large upfront investments, right? If I needed to have a state-of-the-art security platform with infinite scalability, you might have been looking at $300,000-$400,000 upfront investment. If you're a 25, 30, 35 user environment, like it's never going to happen. Microsoft has the ability to provide economies of scale. So even a 1 or 2 user shop can be really hitting above their weight class as far as the technologies they are leveraging in their industry. Agility, I kind of touched on that. Because cloud is really a consumption-based model, you have the ability to scale out and burst and scale back in lean times as needed. It also allows you really to expand your workforce. Traditionally, you're probably hiring people in, Southern Ontario, maybe within 50, 75 kilometers if they really want to trek it to come into the office. But, I think the perfect indicator right now is my head office is in Denver, Colorado, and I'm based out of Southern Ontario. I am 100% completely remote, and it's because my organization has leveraged cloud services. We're a cloud forward organization. They're able to acquire talent outside of their geographical restriction, which means your hiring pool is much larger and much more experienced, which can help you edge out your competition. And that's the final item we're going to talk about here. Cloud's not going away, right? There may be some specific reasons why you need to keep one foot on premise, but a lot of the cutting edge industry, and it doesn't matter what vertical you're in right now, are adopting or have adopted cloud technologies. So getting in front of that and understanding that this is what your next move technological wise should be. And instead of treating it as a cost inhibitor, treating it as a multiplier for your businesses. So we'll hop ahead to the next slide. We're going to talk about cloud or Azure and what is it? And really what it is, and I don't want to make you afraid of this, it's somebody else's computer, right? But much, much better. So the idea or the concept is, if you're running your own business, you in the past would have bought a server and that sits in a closet somewhere, and you've got heating and cooling and power and backup and all this stuff, and that's yours. But there's a false sense of security that might be around that of well, it's mine and I own it and no one can get to it. But with the advent of the internet and everyone being connected all the time, there are unknown forces outside. So when you take an organization like Microsoft, who is now providing DoD level encryptions, and a lot of these will be US related, but there are Canadian equivalencies. They are providing services to some of the most highly classified organizations in the world. And with that comes a burden. But they are hitting every compliancy and security module out the door. SOC 2, SOC 3, PIPEDA, HIPAA, FINRA compliancies, and they've really doubled down over that in the last couple of years. But what does this mean for you? It means when you adopt that stack, you have instant access to those top tier security and compliancy regulations. And this is starting to become a really big thing in Southern Ontario, really in Canada in general. But if you've ever tried to go for a cyber insurance policy recently, they're starting to ask them very poignant questions like, are you compliant with this? Can you provide that? And the answer is always going to be yes if you're in Azure. They are leading the industry for compliancy and security. And that is something that you can leverage as an organization. So that's something that's worth looking into. Extending your familiar architecture. So even though it may mean adopting a brand new approach to technology, it doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a very, very good chance that your business was built off the back of Microsoft's infrastructure, right? Windows operating systems, Microsoft Office, server in the back end. So this is a company that has grown with you and has evolved its practices. And the best part about it is you're going to extend this architecture into its natural state. Azure, being provided by Microsoft, has a direct line really in all the technology you're already using. And they're changing how that works in the cloud. There's new technologies that you can start leveraging that do not exist in traditional formats. And we'll get a little bit more into that later. And actually, that kind of does lead into the industry-leading innovation. They are capturing large swaths of market segments right now because they're redesigning how the industry works. We're seeing this with a lot of the Office 365 stuff. We're seeing this with Teams. We're seeing this with virtual desktoping. We're seeing this on how you manage security and endpoints. And they're on a rapid acceleration and growth because they realize they need to be able to really pave the way for every other industry, because the entire Fortune 500 companies generally run on Azure. And the fun part about this is you're probably already consuming Azure and you don't realize it. There's a lot of back-end architecture and infrastructure that goes in and comes from Azure in your business and your day-to-day. A lot of software applications you're probably running right now, software as a service, there's a very good chance they're being hosted and presented on Azure. Things like Netflix and large organizations, they don't have their own data centers. They're leveraging companies like Azure to run and deliver this technology. So we'll hit to the next slide here. So we've already touched on some of the benefits of Microsoft Azure, but we're going to go a little bit more specific. Azure is more cost effective for SMBs than other providers. And a lot of this has to do with the licensing. We'll get into it a little bit later about other cloud providers and why you maybe want to choose Azure. But the reality is, if you're going to look at another cloud provider, you're probably going to be running Windows on those other cloud providers. And they have to pay royalties and licensing to Microsoft to use this, which means their baseline costs are generally going to be more expensive. Microsoft's taken a very interesting approach where they've developed a lot of Office 365 SKUs and packaged in a lot of extra value that only applies to Azure. So you may already have a lot of the licensing and the requirements already included on your account and not have to pay extra. So when you start to run these economies and you look at the return on investment and you actually dive in, Azure tends to be more cost effective than other providers, despite what the sticker shock up front may be. They've also, because they are the ones that are really building your end user environment and the backend environment and your cloud environment, they have tightly integrated services. So they're more seamlessly integrated, and there's a concept called single sign-on as an example, where you have one set of credentials starting from logging into your systems all the way to every application you run. And Microsoft's really good at integrating that. And depending on the stack and what you're running, you now have a completely secured environment that is locked in and completely monitored and secured by Microsoft. And then you don't have to worry about password leaks or anything like that, because you've got best-in-class security up front. And that's already likely included in what you're consuming from them. And quite honestly, small to medium businesses were built on Windows. Your options out there were probably Windows and Linux. And unless you were very, very specifically building something on a Linux platform, you defaulted to Windows. Even if you're running on a Mac there's a very good chance your backend infrastructure was Windows because they built and they pioneered this industry. With the next slide. And I kind of alluded to it earlier, but 95% of Fortune 500 companies are using Azure, right? That's huge. That is a massive market segment, right? In the past, AWS would have been the dominating force because they were first to market. But as Microsoft really doubled down and invested, and we saw it with Office 365, we saw it with their teams, we saw, the acceleration due to COVID and the massive push for work from home, the advantages of Microsoft Azure became clear. They had developed an extremely effective model that every Fortune 500 company actually forklifted themselves off of legacy architecture or other cloud providers to live on Azure. And that should say something, right? That is a massive, massive win for them. And it can also bleed down to you, right? You let the big guys pay for the innovation, and then you get the economies of scale and all the benefits of that at no extra cost. It's one of the beauties of adopting a cloud forward approach. The next slide. So some of the other benefits more relevant or specific to your organizations. And one of my favorites is Azure Virtual Desktop. So there's going to be a little bit of a technical background to this, but the concept is a virtualized desktop accessible to you on any device at any time, as long as you have an internet connection. This decouples your data from local storage, it decouples it from your local system and puts it kind of enclosed in the Microsoft infrastructure, and then present it out to you in a virtual desktoping window. Now, there are versions of this technology, but Azure Virtual Desktop is unique to Azure. It will provide you a true Windows 10 or Windows 11 desktop experience, which means integrations are better. Your applications will work more seamlessly like you were working on your own workstation. And when I talked about some of the licensing, if you're running a business premium SKU, which is probably the most cost-effective bang for your buck SKU that Microsoft offers, it includes the licensing for this as well, which means you don't need large upfront licensing investments like you would with other providers. You're going to get better integration to some of the technology you're already using, like OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams. All this works natively in this, whereas other organizations and other cloud providers have to do patchworks and maybe some integrators, and it's not quite there. And Microsoft has been heavily investing in this technology, and it's seeing almost weekly improvements. You can stream like 8K video, high quality audio through this, and this is unique to Azure. So this really changes your model going to an organization. As an organization, you do not have to buy infrastructure anymore. You do not have to buy even laptops anymore, technically. You could adopt a bring your own device methodology if desired, and then everything lives containerized in Azure. One of the major advantages of that, especially if you're dealing with intellectual property, is data loss prevention. There is no chance a laptop's getting stolen now and you've got IP on it, because all of this is going to exist in the cloud. If a laptop gets stolen, you just invalidate the laptop, go to Best Buy, go to Pace, you can buy whatever model they have available at that time. We don't have to worry about backlog. We don't have to worry about stock issues. You buy what runs Windows, and then you log back into this environment and you're good to go. Next slide. Fantastic. So we talked about compliancy, and this is a big thing, right? Whether we want it to be or not. Our industry is now starting to mandate this. And when I say our industry, I mean every industry. Whether you're dealing with PIPEDA for healthcare or PCI DSS for any credit card information, FINRA, ISO compliances, anything. This has a compliant management portal, so PACE can help your organization meet these certifications. And that is huge, because when you have a detached infrastructure, if you've got hardware in-house, you've got to worry about, well, is it properly patched? Does this version, do I have to get rid of this because it's out of compliance now? Do I have to, start refreshing hardware just to stay within compliance? This becomes a thing of the past. You are always going to be on a platform that can hit certifications and compliances, because that is a major focus for Microsoft. Quite recently, if we have anybody in hazardous goods, based on controlled goods for Canada, Azure is now a provider of that. And that is something that is very hard to obtain. So if you have any controlled goods organizations either you deal with or are yourself, Microsoft Azure will provide you the compliancy for that. Move forward. And we're talking about, so additional benefits, increasing your return on investment, right? As I'd mentioned, business premium is like the de facto SKU when you start consuming numerous services from Microsoft. And we've seen the enhancement of that over time. If you were running an on-premise remote desktop or terminal server, choosing your methodology, you would likely already have this SKU just to have Office in a shared activation mode. If you are consuming Office 365 and you want to do Office, so if you choose an exchange to the mail Office 365, and then you want to do Teams and the Office 365 Office suites, the next logical jump would have been Business Premium. There's a very good chance you're already existing on this technology, which means you already have pretty much everything you need to spin up virtual desktoping. In the past, you're probably looking at $10,000 to $15,000 of upfront investment, and then you still need to buy Business Premium to get the shared activation. So they're really doubling down and putting more and more technology, and we're seeing this as time goes on. So you may already have one foot in Azure right now, and you don't even realize it. And this is the interesting thing. If you're consuming any services through Office 365, SharePoint, Exchange, Office Online, any of that, all of that runs on Azure. So when you start putting the rest of your infrastructure on there, you're now living in the same data center. There is no latency, there's no disconnect. You get improved experiences and performance by adopting this. So this is a very, very great way to kind of double down and increase your investments on platforms and services you're already using. So we'll move forward. So why Azure versus other clouds, right? This is important because you're going to have a lot of options out there, right? I kind of already talked about AWS, like, you know, there's GCP, we've got local data centers and cloud providers that'll try to win on price. But we've got to understand, especially with the private clouds, and private clouds would be organizations that run their own data centers. So, you know, like Rogers, as an example, might have a data center nearby, and you might be able to host within them. They're considered private cloud. A public cloud would be like Amazon, Google, you know, they would be the ones you consider public cloud because they are open to the public and anyone can kind of set up and spin and run their own infrastructure. But in an environment or a self-hosted data center where they are assigning you hardware, you have limitations, right? You're essentially just paying somebody else to host physical hardware for you, and you are locked into that hardware. They may have the ability to grow up and grow down, but it requires them to buy more hardware to do that. Azure specifically has investments for Fortune 500 companies, so you can scale up and scale down and not have to re-sign contracts and figure out what your growth strategy is. And also it allows you to move, right? If you need to move to other data centers, if you need to move to other organizations, if you need to shut down and scale down, Microsoft's not going to hold you to a contract or you engage 3 years, here's our buyout. There are some stipulations. I'm not going to say you get a free out, but they are very agile with the ability to spin up and shut down resources, which is something that generally doesn't live with other private data centers. And I mentioned earlier, it's more tightly integrated into services you're already consuming. If you're transacting anything Microsoft right now, I guarantee their integrations are going to be better than any other cloud provider out there for good reason, right? They built it. So obviously it's going to consume better. And then it's up to other organizations to provide similar functionality. You know, it's second kick at the can. You're always going to probably want to go with the person that built the technology first. So that leverages into better integrations, which we talked about with your Office, integrating into your Azure virtual desktop and integrating into your endpoints. And it can be more cost effective when leveraged correctly. Scaling is huge. Paying for what you're using. If you're trying to adopt a very similar CapEx model where I spend X every 5 years and we grow into it, if you take that exact model and put it in the cloud, it's going to seem very expensive. So there is a shift, and organizations like Pace Technical have this mindset and methodology to build your environment really almost for the next 30 days. What do you need? And then we will, depending on your workload and your flow, you'll have a very refined and sharpened pencil approach to your infrastructure, which means you're not going to be paying for stuff you're not using. It's a very different way to approach, and organizations, like I say, Pace, have the mindset and the technical know-how to do that. So I'm going to hand this back over to Michael. He's going to talk about the flexibility of Azure and specifically why he's going to recommend it.
Exactly. Thanks, Matt. All great info. So yeah, this is one of the other things, like I speak to lots of businesses day in and day out about cloud services. You know, some are happy with the environment they're in and some not so happy. But one of the things a platform like Azure provides you is a little bit more flexibility if you're not as happy, let's say, with the service organization that you're working with, and now you want to change to a different provider. So there's definitely an advantage to Azure there. And let me just kind of explain how that works. So companies like Pace and other companies that call themselves MSPs and whatnot that offer their own private cloud services generally want you in their private cloud. Why? Well, it makes you sticky because it's not so easy to then change providers. Because if you want to change providers and don't want to use Pace Technical anymore, and I have your whole infrastructure hosted at my own private data center, all of your servers, all of your data, all of your information, when you want to change to another provider, somehow, some way, you have to pick up and move all that data. And that move is a project. And the project is going to scale from somewhat simple to, can be very, very complicated. It could be almost like, you having to go out and, buy, let's say, new servers, and a team of my people has to come in and do a fresh install from the ground up. We've got to do the installation of the operating system and then install all your applications and then kind of migrate all of your data and then re-implement all the security for all of your users from the ground up and go visit everybody's workstation. Like, it can be a giant project to move. And that's what makes you very sticky if you are in someone's private cloud. And I'll tell you, that's why a lot of providers, especially companies like us that have made a big investment in their cloud infrastructure, 100%. It's like buying a big apartment building. And if you own this big apartment building, you got to rent these rooms. We can't let all these things sit vacant. We got to get you in our cloud. The other thing is that one provider to the next can set up and configure their back-end systems. Is it running fully on a Microsoft platform? Is it potentially running on a Linux platform? And now you want to go and move that to somewhere else, may or may not be so easy. So all depending on how that provider has configured systems, as well as the cooperation level. When you want to go to move to somebody else, you need their cooperation. And again, as I mentioned, it could potentially be a complete rebuild. Now, if you had all of your cloud services in Azure, obviously, and Microsoft 365 for your mail and Teams and things like that, in the majority of cases, a move is literally just an account change. Now, there's a little bit of a process in the background in paperwork that has to happen, and you still do need cooperation from whoever your current provider is. But when you do want to move, let's say you don't like Pace anymore and all of your systems are in Azure, now we don't have to move any data or systems or anything like that. We're literally just going to do an account change of the support owner of your cloud infrastructure that's going to be there as the admin people that are going to support your environment. So this is a huge thing because I talk to lots of businesses that, they're unhappy with the provider, they're in their cloud. Once they start hearing how much it costs, to move and do this change, that's a deterrent from them changing. And then they just end up living with this provider that's, not being very nice to them. So that's definitely a huge thing. But the other thing that I wanted to mention, and not to take anything away from the cloud, it is amazing, lots of benefits to using cloud services. Matt went over a lot of them, but really what everybody needs to know at the end of the day, cloud services are tools, and anybody can provide you tools. Any MSP can get you cloud services, whether it's their own cloud or Azure. They're probably going to try and push you to their own cloud just because, again, the stickiness factor. If you're in Azure, you can leave at any time and go to somebody else. But tools are great. Tools are necessary. Security tools, cloud tools, IT management tools, et cetera, that we use every day. 100% definitely necessary, but not going to be the end decider of what the environment is for you, for your people, how you get your jobs done, what kind of security you have on your network, et cetera. So some things that you want to look for, outside of somebody just being able to provide Azure services, obviously, but optimally, when you're looking for a partner and you want to go into Azure, definitely you want to work with a Microsoft partner that has people trained on all of these tools, on all of these platforms. Gold and above is optimal, only because, almost anybody can sign up to be a Microsoft partner if they buy, a certain amount of licensing per se, if they have enough clients to purchase enough licensing. But when you're gold and above, you have to demonstrate a lot more expertise and show a lot more experience before you can get this designation. So that's just one other fail-safe that you might want to look for, as well as some sort of a cloud designation. Obviously, going into cloud services, there is a little bit of specialization, especially within Azure, to how it's both set up, configured, managed, maintained, etc. And then, yeah, having not only a cloud designation, but making sure that they are providing cloud services to other clients, and maybe being able to get references and speak to people in that area. So that's one thing for cloud services, just looking at Azure. But really, the bigger picture and the bigger impact that you are going to see when you're choosing, some sort of a, MSP to work with, whether it's cloud services or not, is trying to determine, look, is this a proactive or a reactive based service? Anybody can provide you the tools, anybody can get you to the cloud, but how is it managed and maintained? How is it secured? How is it reported to you, the kind of results that you're seeing and the kind of results that your end users, what kind of experience are they having using technology? Those are the things that we want to really optimize for you, to make sure that you're getting the most out of the investments that you're making in technology. So just to give you an idea, when I talk about proactive, versus reactive tools, just to show you where, most companies in our space, where they live is up in this top area. So this is kind of the overview of our company and our structure and our services. So most companies in our space, geez, I'll tell you, in the GTA alone, there's probably about 400 companies that consider themselves, in the MSP, managed services, IT services, security services, etc. Most of them live up here in the reactive side of the business. And as you can see, like even in our space, cloud services, it's a tool, it's a reactive service. So that gets managed by our centralized team that manages like our monitoring tool, the security tool like firewalls, antivirus, etc., our backup and disaster recovery services. So that really comes kind of under that fold. And you have obviously your ticketing system. Any reactive provider is going to have some sort of help desk. You have a problem, you can call them. You want an opinion, you can call and ask for their opinion, etc. But outside of those things, they're not really going in and having any kind of process and procedure behind that to really look at things. So really, why most people work with us anyways, and where people see the best results, is having a proactive service. Ours comes in these three areas: our alignment team, our consulting team, and our client success team. Just to whiz through them super quick, like our proactive, standard and alignment team. This is a means where we're actually looking. We probably have a little over 100 line items of things that we're checking regularly within every environment. Whether you're in a cloud, the Microsoft cloud, our own private cloud, it doesn't matter. By the way, just so you know, the Azure cloud, there's there's no real like wizardry behind it. It is a data center with Windows servers. Granted, those are, the hierarchy of it managed by Microsoft. But once it gets to our level and your level, we're being provided with basically the framework of Windows servers. We still have to go in and set up and manage and maintain those Windows servers, just like we set up, a physical server in your office. The same management, except, the only exception is we don't have to maintain the hardware anymore. We do still have to update and patch and secure, etc. So just because you're in someone's cloud, you can't take it for granted that you're all of a sudden on this proactive service and everything is being done. I can tell you with the majority of our marketplace, the opposite is true. So really by having this process of, looking into standards and security alignment, aligning you to best practices and IT known standards, really the only way to know that your business is secure. It's great to have security tools, your antivirus, your firewall, phishing protection, all the other tools are great. But unless you have a process for looking at these things, because that's the other thing people don't understand around IT. As much as it's, mechanical and it's, processors and storage and hardware and software, it's very organic. As you add users, take users away from a network, as you update and patch systems, as you add software, remove software, it changes the organics of what you have within your network. So these things need to be constantly looked at. You as a business need to be reported to specifically exactly what's going on. Otherwise, you have what I call blind spots. And blind spots are the unknown of, I don't know what's going on with IT in the background because, hey, nobody has a process for looking at it. I'll give you an example of a blind spot I see with most small businesses. I ask them, if you had some sort of a major failure, fire, flood, disaster, or whatnot, a disgruntled employee grabs your server and runs out of the office, what is the process and timeline to get you and your business back up and running? Most people think, oh, well, I would call my IT provider and yeah, they'll get us up. They don't know what the process is. They don't know how long it takes. And sadly, most of them don't know that the average in that scenario is probably about 4 to 5 business days at a minimum to get your business back up and running from one of those scenarios if you are on a more standard type of backup service versus one of the more modern like disaster recovery business continuity approaches. Anyways, kind of to keep moving on, when you align to specific standards, it reduces that noise, like the amount of issues and things like that your people might see, gives them a better experience. And then it ensures all your tools are managed and configured properly. Again, you can't just take it for granted everything is happening, or you don't want to hear from your IT people. Well, you should at least be reported specific information from your IT people. And then our second proactive team comes around strategy. But again, it's another area that every business, small or big, needs to be proactive around strategy as well, and planning. I mean, it just helps you make the right IT decisions, helping you control costs, and lets you know exactly where you stand. Certainly with our strategy team, they're getting the information and feedback and metrics from all the other service delivery areas, and then coming to you speaking in plain terms about, here's the results that we're seeing today. Here's where we think we could put some time and attention or budget to get you better results. Here's what's slowing your people down right now, and here's how we might improve that. Cloud services may even be an answer for you for being more agile and whatnot. But decisions like what cloud to move to, moving to the cloud just in general, how to do it, when to do it, what's the right way, what's the right platform to be on, what's the best plan, all comes out of our strategy team. Most of our clients do not have internal IT resources. So most of them, they don't know what questions to ask. They don't know when to ask for, opinions and things like that. You need somebody proactively that understands your business, that's constantly looking at things and helping you make these decisions versus you trying to do them yourself. And our last proactive team is our client success team. And they're the ones that are responsible for all the reporting that we do, tracking all the metrics and KPIs around IT, and really just making sure that you as a business, as well as your employees, are seeing success with IT. Like, you make most businesses' biggest investment is in their people and in their payroll. Most businesses' people are working on IT all day, every day. So where can you see, a certain return on investment in this big investment you're making in your people and your payroll? It's around IT. So we definitely want to ensure that you are getting the most out of your investment dollars in your people by making sure that they can be as productive as possible doing their jobs and using the technology that you've implemented, and also trying to help you implement technologies you may not even be aware of today that could help you and your people get their jobs done better. So reporting is a big thing. And, I mentioned I meet with a lot of people and I ask them, well, how is everyone? Oh, my IT people are great and they're doing a great job. How do you know? Like, well, they do all this stuff in the background and I think everything is good. Well, without the lack of reporting, I can just tell you this. Most people think their IT people are checking everything and doing all this work after hours, overnight, and things like that. Yet they just don't tell them about it or show them any kind of reporting related to it. I can tell you the reporting part is the easy part. The hard part is creating that structure and process and proactive culture within your IT business. The reporting part is easy if you have that process and procedure in place. So if you're not getting any kind of really good reporting around metrics, KPIs, and exactly what's going on around IT, I'm going to tell you, as a company 20 years ago, that was also a very reactive company that used to tell my clients the same thing because we had every intention of being proactive. We just didn't have that process baked in at that time until we revamped everything. And it took us years to develop the process and procedure that we use right now. So just to give you a glimpse into the kind of reporting that we provide, and probably as a business that you should expect, we have a custom reporting portal that we've created that we provide for all of our clients. It's got resources for your typical end users. They can go in and see all the information related to them as a user on your network. They can go in and look at issues that they've reported and track the progress on those. But there's also other things for end users, like we have a training portal or university section where we're providing out of the box, on demand, video-based training for you and all of your people. And out of the box, our training comes with the whole Microsoft suite, also very applicable for today's conversation. Training on Teams, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, SharePoint, etc. So all can be customizable too, and add in other things specific to your business. But reporting on a full audit of all of your inventory, like tracking all of your endpoints, servers that you have them, whether they're on premise or they're in a cloud, every line of software that you have installed, like these things need to be tracked and maintained for you. All of your Microsoft 365 licensing information. I don't know how many times we started with new clients and no one's ever really paid much attention to their Microsoft 365 accounts. And when we come on, we find out that they've been paying for months and sometimes even years for people that are no longer at their business, yet they're still paying for Microsoft 365 accounts because no one has that proactive process for going in and auditing things like this. I talked about the roughly 100 line items of things that we're checking for our businesses. This is where we report all the results of those checks. We assign a simple risk score. At a glance, you can see if you're having any kind of issues or areas of concern. We provide live dashboards. On the left there is our security dashboard. Again, at a glance, you can see based on the 8 categories of cybersecurity that we've identified exactly where you stand, service metrics, response times, our customer satisfaction, etc. So just to give you kind of a glimpse, but you need to be holding whoever you're working with accountable if you're in management or ownership of your small business somebody needs to be coming and reporting to you specifically. And I don't mean reporting to say, here's how many service tickets that you submitted last month, and here's how many we did, and here was your server uptime last month, or super basic information like that. We have that report too. It comes automated with the IT management tool that we use. But we find the live dashboards and these metrics are so much more useful to a business because it's information you can actually use to help better your business. And then the last piece of our portal is our planning tool. Again, I speak to lots of businesses. Usually that strategy or account management call that they do with people ends up being just a simple conversation about, hey, how are we doing? And hey, can we sell you some more hardware? Maybe you need to buy some more new laptops or keyboards or monitors or things like that. Ours is, again, we put in an agenda in advance in this planning tool for our strategy team. We're getting metrics and information from the other service delivery areas, so we can have a meaningful conversation with you about what's going on in your environment. Hey, is it time to move to cloud services? Is Azure the right platform, or even a private cloud platform? Or maybe you don't even need Azure services. Maybe your software company offers a SaaS model that you can just use a web-based version. All these kind of conversations come, through our strategy team. So just wanted to kind of to recap that section. Not all providers are created equal, and you need to do a little bit more digging. It's great that they can provide you with cloud services and all the tools. You do need to dig a little bit deeper than that and have people prove to you that they are really a true proactive company that's going to get your business the best results and the results that you deserve with your technology. So basically, that's all the content that we wanted to provide for you today. I do see somebody did. Okay, and it was actually Matt just talking about hardware delays. I'm sure, my God, every industry that I've been speaking to, just logistics problems of getting everything from raw ingredients, hardware, etc., delays and things like that has been a huge issue, certainly in our industry, but I think every industry probably has their own story around things like that.
It's it's rather relevant, I guess, to the conversation when I talked about the shift, and this is probably one of the biggest driving forces. Like when we as a province had to go remote, I think every laptop across the world became out of stock, right? Because everybody was in-house, and then a ship got jammed in a canal for 3 days and ruined the supply chain.
Yes, one ship.
Ship, right? Kind of shows, we put a lot of dependency on what was out there. And when you brought up that scenario of the disaster recovery, how long does it take to get back up and running? An MSP may be able to tell you, like, oh, well, based on the statistics, we can recover X amount of data in this much time. What doesn't get really advertised is like, but you need hardware to put that on, right? So I can't start doing a restore until that box shows up. And if the lead time on a box that's sized for your organization is 6 months, and that's not uncommon now, that's 6 months where you're not working, which means then you're forced to buy what's available, which means you might be paying 2 to 3 times more just to get back up and running. And then it becomes a back and forth for the insurance companies. And this is just a reality that we're in. It wasn't always this way. So when an organization starts to bring this to your attention and start talking about cloud, there's a lot of reasons for that. And it may be like they're tuned into the channel, they're tuned into what's happening, and they know, I can't get this laptop, I can't get this thing. So like, how do we protect our clients? And that's why we saw a massive adoption of cloud technology, specifically from MSPs that cared to grow their business and grow their clients' businesses, because that's really what a good MSP does, is they're enablers for your organizations.
Yeah, exactly. So look, if anybody, if you're unsure about, or you're thinking about moving to the cloud, you're unsure about what direction to go in, yeah, I'd be more than happy to have a conversation, talk through options that you might have. If you're unsure about, current results and whatnot you're getting, again, love to have a conversation. You can email me, mike@pacetechnical.com. If you haven't ever spoke to us, we can even do a free IT assessment just to try and, check a few of the, like I like to call it, IT gauges, just to see how you fare against, other businesses and how they're managed and maintained and the results that they're seeing. So any questions about that, I'd love to have a conversation. Doesn't look like we have any specific questions. I mean, if anybody had a specific question, we'll give it another minute or so here, but certainly you can always, again, email me and ask questions directly, or arrange for a call to ask questions or whatnot. We can certainly do that. But still doesn't look like there's any questions today. So, hey, Matt, obviously we did a great job and we were super thorough today, and hopefully already answered the questions that people had within the presentation. So with that, I'd like to say thanks again, Matt, for jumping on with us today and sharing your expertise with us and everybody else on the call today.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. And for everybody else, enjoy the rest of your day. And we hope to speak to you at some point soon.